I'm a French Hungarian, married to a Catalan woman with 2 children, going to the French lycée here in Barcelona for now about 11 years. And I've never worked for anybody. I'm an entrepreneur since I left my MBA in University of Miami in 1990. And before I actually start off on a little chronology, which I will use to add a new dimension to the pivot concept, which is called the near-death experience. I'm not sure if you've encountered the association of the word near-death experience with pivot, but it's very important because usually, although they won't say this, when you're in a pivot situation, it's because you're in a near-death situation. Near-death from a cash flow perspective, of course. I mean, I'm alive and kicking, so I didn't mean from a health perspective. Just for me to understand a little bit the audience, who is from Spain? Can you raise your hand? Okay. Who is from outside of Europe? Okay. Who would like to start a company when they finish their MBA? Who would eventually want to start a company before they're 30? Okay, so we're pretty much entrepreneurs, right? I guess. Well, let me share with you a little bit the chronology. I started my first company in 1996 with 21 credit cards after having left the University of Miami Graduate Business School. At that time, it was a simple proposition to accumulate all of these credit card applications. You would get them because as a student, they would be very lenient in terms of credit profile. And with $55,000 worth of credit, I started my first company, focused on e-commerce in Latin America, and sold that company in 2000 to a company on the NASDAQ in the United States. Unfortunately, that company 6 months later went bankrupt. And with that, dragged all of my fortune, all of my hard work of the last 5 years into the rubbish, into the garbage pan. So it was a very, very important point in my life because actually everything that I had worked for had gone, and I had to figure out what I wanted to do. So I came back to Europe and basically bought a company that was very similar to the one that I had, but it was in the stage of almost on the verge of bankruptcy. So with this company, basically I tried to restructure it. I was somewhat successful, and then in my infinite wisdom, I wanted to create a telco operator to compete against Telefonica and offer ADSL 1 meg. So I was actually the first, if not the second, in Spain to offer 1 megabyte ADSL connectivity with voice over IP and IPTV. Unfortunately, I realized that the business model was flawed and no opportunity to change that business model was basically afforded to me, because there was just no other way to turn around a company that needed an enormous amount of money for infrastructure. And I had to make a conscious decision, knowing very well what it means to go bankrupt, knowing very well what it means to fail, to actually close the company and again lose my money, except this time because I was the one responsible for that. I had made a mistake in the business model. So that was my second one. First time it's third party cause, this second one is my cause. You could say bad luck, whatever. The point is, it's business. Business is not, there is no guarantee to success. There is only your reaction and your ability to improvise and to adapt to the different circumstances in the market. So in that context, my former partner in the company called Best TV came to me and said, listen, there's a new law in Spain and in Europe that's going to change. It's going to force all the broadcasters to create digital terrestrial television. And what we should do is we should be a digital terrestrial television platform where we can offer content and to anybody who has digital terrestrial television and compete with the internet, offer VOD on digital terrestrial television, have a much more affordable delivery mechanism because we don't have to have the costs associated with IP distribution, And I said, okay, sounds like a good idea. How much money do you have? He said, I have no money. He comes to me, says, how much money do you have? I say, I have no money. So basically the only money we did have was 3,000 euros a piece for basically half the company each. We created the company in September of 2005, and then we began. We began two things, actually. We began the business model, the business plan. Business model and business plan on one end, and defining the architecture of the technology on the other. We started here at Salle. And so on the architectural side, we realized that we needed more than 2 million euros to actually develop the whole platform to try to produce a product that we think or we thought we could sell. And on the other side, of course, in the meantime, we needed to eat. We needed to generate revenues so that we could have actually some form of living. And of course, we need to have some form of living if you want to have one of the two, finding time to raise money. So ultimately what I did is I went to China, and I immediately went off on a tangent to try to negotiate distribution agreements with Chinese companies who manufactured set-top boxes. I'm not sure if you remember, but around 2005, 2006, it was the analog switch off, and so lots of households were acquiring set-top boxes to enable their old televisions to tune in to digital terrestrial television. So there was a short-term business model there to try to generate revenue. I went to Shenzhen, got some credit from Chinese companies, not an easy thing to do, and then came back and started selling to different distributors in Spain so that we could start generating revenue. But there was no way on the planet that we could generate enough revenue to get 2 million euros worth of money to invest into the technological platform. So on that end, in parallel, we obviously joined the University of La Salle. What they had at the time was the Transferencia Tecnológica, and we set up a very complex and well-managed plan to develop the product with last year university students, and based on that to eventually also engage what they had a department which is still there called Tech Innova, and attempt to get subsidies from the Catalan government, subsidies from the Spanish government, so we could finance that activity. Well, we did quite successfully. Well, we raised a total of 1 million euros, and we did develop a product which we showcased in 2008, which we had at the time called MovieBox. The company was Best TV and the product was MovieBox. The idea was a set-top box that was controlled over the digital terrestrial television frequency and allowed you to have the same service that you would have with Imagenio. For that launching, we raised 2 million euros finally on top of the million, so 3 million euros from Caja Navarra. And of course, we started hiring people, marketing, the whole infrastructure, and launched the product. Little did we know that there was a very, very difficult market to sell a set-top box which would allow you to have Imagenio-like services, because the cost of the set-top box was prohibitively high. We knew that this was a factor, but we anticipated that ultimately what this would do would people really want the service, and since they would want the service, they would buy the box. Unfortunately, we were wrong. So in 2008, we've blown 3 million euros. We have 15,000 euros in sales, and every month we're spending about 90,000 euros in infrastructure. That's a recipe for a disaster. I tell you, you have to take my word for that. So what do we do? Well, what we did was a 90-degree turn and said, we are no longer an operator, we are a software company. We are selling our platform not to B2C users, not to the end consumers, but to broadcasters. We're going to sell the platform to television broadcasters who own the television licenses and who will be able to monetize our solution, our platform, on top of their television licenses, increase what they want is revenue per user, and pay us licensing fees for that. So then we began and embarked on the process of acquiring customers. Basically, we did acquire customers after I raised an additional €1 million in that turnaround, because that turnaround required funding. Without that extra €1 million, there would have been no way we could have time to reshift our attentions and change our organization from a B2C organization to a B2B organization. And ultimately, we did secure in 2009 our first big customer called Mediaset, which is the largest private television company in Italy that belongs to Berlusconi, and it was a multi-million-euro project. That saved the company. But more importantly, what saved the company was that we decided to abandon 3 years and €3 million worth of work and turn around and try to embark on a different business model as a B2B software provider for the broadcast industry. And then eventually we got a second customer, which was the largest satellite operator in Turkey, Digiturk. That was also another multi-million-dollar project. By that time, you can probably imagine I'm exhausted. So I said to myself, or to my partner, listen, what I think we should do is we should call it quits, not in the sense that everything's bad, but in the sense that, hey, we've done our job, we've created a business model, we've created revenue, we've created operating profit revenue, we've shown that the system works, and now what we should do is sell the company to a third party so that we can monetize our success and then eventually move on in life. Well, eventually that's what happened. And in October of 2010, we sold the company for a small amount of money, relatively, of €9.7 million to a UK listed company in England. So I want to sort of make some abstractions or some conclusions. Number one, if we had not made a decision to turn in another direction, I wouldn't be here speaking to you today. We'd probably tell you another failure story. So that would have been, that's a very important point. The second important point is we had to come to terms with the fact that we know what we are, we know what we like, we know what we want to do, and since we know what we like, we know who we are, and we know what we want to do, we should just make the best of that. And clearly, as an entrepreneur, I'm not a manager. So the idea was to create a company, to create a profitable and projectable business model, and then for a third party to come and absorb this business model to maximize or leverage its value. So this was my business plan, and this was my partner's business plan. Another element is important, is funding. It's obvious that funding is important, but if you don't spend time looking for funding, you won't get it. So in a business partnership, somebody has to take on the responsibility of talking to the subsidies, of talking to the government, of talking to VCs, of talking to business angels. Somebody has to take that responsibility, which is equally important as talking to customers, talking to partners, talking to suppliers, talking to the team. They're equally important. The fact that we became a business wasn't because we raised €3 million and spent €3 million and had to raise another €1 million. The fact that we became a business was because somebody came, gave us their money in exchange of our product. That act of genesis of a business took place in a B2B setting. In a B2C it did also, but it was just too little, too late. In a B2B setting, it was perfect, right on time. So ultimately, the change of business model, the change of mentality, is what saved us. A very important point. I have started my fourth company a year and a half ago called the Param 24/7 XS. It has absolutely nothing to do with broadcast industry, has nothing to do with software for television. It is a company with a own proprietary patent pending platform that allows you to open doors, garage doors, building doors with your mobile phone. Now, where the hell did I get that idea from? Well, it wasn't mine. My chief technology officer in my company, in Best TV, when he saw that I sold the company, and I was there, I have to confess, languish for 4 months as an employee in the company that bought mine. He saw that how I felt, how I was, the motivation that I lost. It's my genetics. It's not because the job necessarily was a bad one. And said, listen, hey, I've got this idea. Why don't we create, I've created a prototype that, look, Here's the prototype, and with my mobile phone, I can open the door. I said, that's fantastic, I love it. So I left the company, and then we started Param 24/7 Access. But then after a few months of working, and before joining Barcelona Activa, where we are now, we've been there for now a year, I said, listen, I see much more future in creating a platform that will allow anybody to open any door through any device. And so let's work on that and not just focus on the lock. It took some time for him to realize that there is eventually a universe of business in opening garage doors, in opening home doors, in opening office doors. And there's a lot of technological challenges in bridging that gap between the real world of a key and having a mobile phone as a key. In a very competitive field where you have thousands of companies that offer fingerprint, eye scan, numeric pad interfaces, what business model can you find? Well, we focused and evolved into the business model of basically remote door opening. Remote door opening, what does that mean? I'll give you a few examples. If you rent your house out to a third party, how many of you, or how many do you know, or how many of you have already rented somebody's house and had to wait for them to give you the key for you to use during the duration of your stay? Or a real estate company to give you the key so that you can stay? Well, that has an inconvenience and that has a cost. With the fact that somebody rents your house, you can enable their phone to access the house whenever they want during the time that you've enabled it, basically obliterates, destroys the cost of the key, destroys the problem of security, and destroys the inconvenience of having to be physically present or hire somebody to be physically present to hand the key over to you. Gone. How many of you have already worked with your remote control to try to enter the garage door and it's not working, or you can't find it, or it was lost, or you need to buy a new remote control of 38 euros or 40 euros? It's a common problem. Well, with your phone, you can open your garage door, and of course, if you can open the garage door with your phone, you can work with your hands-free in your car, or with iPhone Siri, whatever it is. No cost. No cost. And in terms of real estate, how much money do you think is being spent in creating copies of keys to hand over to real estate agents, to hand over to bank employees? Keys that are lost, keys that aren't found, keys that are put in one office, have to go to one office to the other office. You need to drive to pick up the keys to show the customer. That's a bottleneck for people visiting your house. That's a cash drain on real estate companies' balance sheets to managing keys. If you can enable the phones of the agents, enable the phones of the employees, enable the phones of the prospects who want to see the apartments, see the properties, all that cost disappears. Well, all of this has a lot of complexity in terms of who can enter the house, when they can enter the property, how, etc., etc. And you don't want it to be phone dependent. You don't want it to be NFC technology, Z-Wave, Bluetooth. You want to be as independent as possible. So we took all of that complexity and put it online, basically, and then with that online, and created also a unit that is installed in the house, which the online platform controls. We therefore created APIs and third parties can work. An example of a customer of ours. They came to us called Parked Inside. I don't know if you've heard of Parked Inside or B-Park. These are companies that are competing to manage empty parking spaces. So assume that all of you have cars, assume that all of you live at home, you left your home, you took your car and you left the garage door, your garage space empty. Well, if you would like to monetize that, why not upload that empty garage space on this portal, and from 10 to 2, for example, offer it at half price as to what normally people are paying for in that same neighborhood, in a public space or in the street, and monetize that. Well, there are now more and more business models that are springing like that. Well, guess what? You need to open the door. Well, that's a simple fact. So you take our APIs, you put our APIs into your portal, and then whatever you do, whatever business logic, whatever workflow you want to impose, you can execute the opening the door piece. So that's how we've evolved from creating a lock that you can open with your phone to turning that into a platform. The difference with this example and the previous example is there was no near-death scenario around this pivoting or evolution of the business model. There was no near-death. So that's what I wanted to simply share with you in terms of my two most relevant pivot experiences. One with a near-death circumstance, and the other one with a normal, standard business model evolution circumstance. I just want to underline, it's very important to not have a preconceived judgment of what you think you are. Again, I'm an entrepreneur. Basically, if you were to create an organizational chart in a matrix scenario, you would have marketing, you would have finance, you would have accounting, you would have sales, you would have technology, you would have all these things. Let me invite you that you also have transversal capabilities, entrepreneurialism. You need to touch a little bit of everything on that end. You don't necessarily have to be the author of the idea. You don't necessarily have to be the genius behind the product. You don't necessarily have to basically focus on one thing. What you have to do is have the understanding of the opportunity, and most importantly, know where your limitations are, what tools you have in your toolbox, how you're going to fill your toolbox with new tools, and the new tools obviously are team, and getting the team involved in your business, in your project, and empowering them. So, Paul, I think that's. I'm open now to all sorts of questions. But yes.
About the last product, the mobile key.
Yeah.
What about the security? Because like the question is, I have like the people can just hack the system and then open the doors to everywhere.
Okay, well, obviously it's a good question. Let me just explain how it works. Nobody would know that your mobile was the key for that, and you enable your mobile phone. So the only reason your phone will work is because it's your phone. There's no code that is being sent anywhere. There is no code. It's GSM network based on a very old delivery technology called missed call. So a missed call is placed, the server registers the source of the call, identifies the phone, compares the phone identification to the profile if they are allowed to do that, cuts the call, and then triggers a whole series of workflows to basically send an order to open the door. So basically there is no code being sent. It's you go online, you enable your phone, and that's it. If somebody takes your phone, they could open the door. That is a security threat. But if somebody takes your keys, they can also open the door. Same thing. Yes?
Do you think your education had practical applications in your whole work experience, or did you work and learn on the spot and work with your feelings?
For me, the MBA was fundamental. Actually, I graduated from Sciences Po, and then I have also a degree from the University of New York in political science. A basis. So learning to learn is, for me, the biggest conclusion of college. Having the tools to understand is the biggest conclusion from the MBA program. So speaking...
Sorry, Andre, they're finishing the undergraduate business here.
Undergraduate business?
Here, yeah, that's group.
Okay,
so
just
a
good clarification. The tools of business, learning to learn, and understanding what people say are the two most important takeaways from education. And speaking the language of the accountant, speaking the language of finance, speaking the language of sales, speaking the language of technology, you need an education for that. You think you can learn yourself, but eventually you will come to a roadblock where you need to speak. I speak English, I speak French, I speak Spanish, I speak Hungarian. The point of the matter is, if you don't speak the same language, you can't communicate. If you don't speak the language of technology, the language of science, management science, the language of accounting, how are you going to understand what is a balance sheet and how are you impacting the balance sheet? You need that education. I think it's fundamental. Fundamental.
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know if I understand correctly how this works with the opening with the mobile phone. What if you run out of battery? Because my mobile phone never has, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't have battery when I get home. So what happens then?
Well, then you need to find your key or your remote control. I'm assuming that your mobile phone you have a mobile phone. Well, the fact is everybody has one or two for sure nowadays, so that's fine. But if there's no battery in your phone, then it's a problem. Then again, if your phone isn't enabled, or you have somebody who has their phone, but you don't have the phone, then the problem with that is that they won't be able to do that. So you have to go online and enable their phone to do that. The difference is that you also have a web application. How does it work with a building? So building administrator basically installs the device, and instead of giving remote controls to all the building dwellers, he goes to them, says, name, telephone, enable. Name, telephone, enable. That's the administrative aspect of the little portfolio or little portal for the building. So once that's done, each can go inside and manage. A family can manage their four mobile numbers. If one family member has them, then your friend, hey, can you call and open the phone for me? And wherever they are in the world, they can open the door for you. That's a different way. But you need either your phone or somebody's phone. If it's somebody's phone, there's that indirect way to do it. But a phone is the key. That's just as if you didn't have. Eventually there will be no more wallets. So you'll be in the store. If you have no battery, you won't be able to buy what you want to buy. I mean, that is a premise. Yeah. If there's a solar storm and we have no electricity, then we're in trouble, for sure.
Then is it an application or is it a missed call? Because I'm not understanding. Like, what's
The missed call is the
the
communication
technology-
message.
The technology is GSM, right? That you're using.
Yes.
You're not using NFC. You're not using any of the new technology that is coming out. Right
No.
now. You're using old technology. But you're using it through an app, or you're using it through because you're using it through your mobile phone number. If I'm understanding correctly.
So if you go online and you enable your phone,
Yeah.
then the database online will know that when it receives the missed call from your phone, that phone is allowed to trigger a process that will open the door.
Yeah.
So the missed call is only a way to interact. Instead of bringing your phone next to the thing, which means that you have to have a lock that is NFC enabled or Z-Wave enabled, it's basically a missed call. The missed call is a way of communicating with the infrastructure. It's not. There's no other thing. There's no intelligence behind that. It's a message. That's what's being sent. A messaging server, a much more reliable than IP.
The same way that you need an NFC receiver, you also need a missed call receiver.
No. There is no receiver needed. Any phone, a Nokia 1996 phone.
No, I mean on the door, not on your phone.
The door has nothing. It has an electronic lock, which is third-party manufactured, and all it's connected to wirelessly connected to a controlling unit, which is what you buy, and so this has a GPRS modem inside, and it's waiting. It's an ear, for an order to open the door. The processing of the order, the security, the profiling is done online. So there is no intelligence on site. The intelligence is online.
And it's a GPRS, so that means
Inside the box.
the modem is always connected to the internet.
It's always connected. But that's part of the, what is our business model? Thank you for, our business model is selling for 500 euros, the unit, the controlling unit, and 12 euros per year per mobile phone.
Ah, okay.
So you want your phone to be the key, it's 12 euros per year.
But those 500 euros include the ongoing internet connection?
Yes.
Okay.
With the switch boxes, would you say that there's a moment that defined when you had to do the pivot? Like when you realized that you had to do it?
With the set-top boxes?
Yeah, the setup boxes.
Yeah, we're very simple. We're running out of money. Zero money, no revenue.
It was a hard decision, like, I mean...
No, I have to tell you, it was a very easy decision. It's either bankrupt, go bust, or survive and thrive. Very simple. You've spent 3 million euros, what do? You close shop, turn off the light, which at some time, I did that in the former company with a telco operator because I couldn't compete. I did not own the infrastructure to provide you ADSL to the home. I was, in a very vulgar way, a reseller. So I spent all this effort in creating a package, acquiring customers, generating revenue for the Telefonica infrastructure, and at the end of the day, when the ADSL war, which took place in 2004, where at the time you had Jastel, Wanadu, and all these different operators bringing down the price for ADSL access at home, I couldn't follow. Eventually, I would make €2 off of every customer that would cost me €300 to acquire. Ridiculous. I had to close, and there was no way around that. Whereas with us, we had invested in a technology, we had invested in a product. The problem we had was the way we were selling it was not successful. We had to repackage it, rebrand it, and sell it as a product to businesses. And that's what we did. But of course, you needed money to do that. So I had to go back and find money to support this change. Because also, if I had no money, you know, sales don't come because you need them to come. Sales comes because you follow a natural process that eventually culminates into a sale. And that takes time.
We just had, when you walked in, Tony Martinez, who works for Security Forest, which is Fergal McConnell's company, if you know Fergal.
Yeah.
So he was explaining how they just did a pivot from B2B to B2C.
Yes,
and he was explaining why B2B is long sales cycles, and then they make a purchase, and then they're not going to make they're not going to pay you for another year, and all these types of things. So they've switched to B to C. So why do you think it makes sense for them to switch from B2B to B2C versus you guys went from B2C? Why did you switch from B2C to B2B, I guess?
Okay.
Because he was talking about his reasoning for, or their reasoning for
So for
making the
Best
switch.
TV, basically, B2C meant, we had our product in MediaMarkt. I also heard him talk about MediaMarkt. First of all, MediaMarkt squeeze you on the margins. And Carrefour also, and all these things. So after being squeezed on the margins, you realize that there's very little money left in the hardware sale. And so you say, no problem, I'm going to acquire customers with recurring revenue. I'm going to create a model so that over the year of revenue, I will get back the cost of my hardware and will cover my operating expenses, and then we'll make profit. And then you come to the conclusion that I have to make sure that people have to stay 1 year. So then you have to put on the box minimum 1 year subscription. And then all of a sudden, when you have a minimum 1 year subscription in a MediaMarkt store, people are saying, whoa, I don't want a 1 year subscription. I just want to buy the box. I don't want to have a billing relationship with you. So then you see boxes aren't being sold, and then you come around and say, well, okay, fine, an alternative plan. I believe that the probability of you staying with me for a year is very high, so I will waive the obligation of a yearly subscription. And then all of a sudden, you're taking the cost of the box, the cost of the distribution, the cost of the customer acquisition, and you're putting it up in the air, and you're hoping that their consumption patterns are going to be more than enough to cover all of that. And then we came to the conclusion that the consumption patterns were not enough. It would take about 2.5 years to get back the amount of money that we're spending to be in the store. So this is no way. I want to stress a B2C model requires marketing money, a lot of marketing money, which is very ingrate. Very difficult to very difficult to say, I'm going to invest €100 and I'm going to get this back. In marketing, very difficult. So we turned around and said, listen, it'll take us a year sales cycle to close a big deal. If we close one big deal, then we're saved. We cover all our costs, and then we can get another big deal, and so on and so forth. And so that's what we did. So we planned for a 1 year sales cycle. And eventually, we got the customer in approximately 11 months. And then in that sense, we got the other customer in 9 months. But by then, obviously, 20 months from the time I've told you I've run out of money to that, like I said, I was exhausted. So operationally, we're profitable, but we needed more money. And I said to myself, well, we've proven the model, let's sell it. So that's why we turned from B2C to B2B, because if in a B2C environment requires a large business marketing budget. I'm not sure if you're familiar. I'm sorry. I'm not sure if you're familiar with a latest advertisement campaign called Wacky TV. You probably are, right? You have your cereal in the morning, and all of a sudden, Wacky TV just appears there. Well, they were bought by a company called Rakuten, some Japanese or Chinese portal that sell everything. So if they wouldn't have been bought by them, they wouldn't be spending this money in all this massive advertisement campaign. Why? Simply because to amortize the costs of capturing a customer, making money off of their movie consumption is extremely lengthy and difficult. However, you can use that to drive business to your all-encompassing e-commerce portal and sell watches, sell clothing, sell anything you want. So then in that sense, as a complementary strategy, it makes sense. So if you're a big company, you can afford to do a specific business model because it's within the context of an overall strategy. B2C.
It sounds like it sounds like the model that you had for Best TV. Well, the costs that you had were kind of a client server, high fixed costs and high variable costs for the set-top boxes as well, which is tough to sell through the types of channels that you're in. Whereas these guys are different, right? They have it's essentially a software model that they have.
Well, then for them it would make sense, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But we had what I always tried to do was if I look at an overreaching story to all of the work that I've done in the past, it's always a bridge between the internet and the real world. I never ever did a 100% internet business model. Never. I don't. I can understand them, and I see the great upside in them. But I never had this genetic inclination for that. I always tried to use the internet for the benefit of the real world and mix them together. Hence the lock. I mean, opening a door. I mean, how can you go from the web to opening a door? That type of thing. And in the Best TV model, we needed definitely a set-top box. How are you going to change an old television or a TV that doesn't have a DTT?